And let's get started. All right, this is all about me. I'm not going to go through all this because Tom already did, but I am the founder and director of Command Prompt. We specialize in Postgres, and we've been doing it since the beginning. We actually have been doing it longer than PostgreSQL has existed. I am one of the chairs of PostgreSQL Conference. If you're a local here, we're actually having a PostgreSQL Conference in November 3rd and 4th with instructor-led training and breakout sessions. Please join us. And a lot of other stuff, Director of Postgres Foundation, founder, blah, blah, blah. It's not all that important. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm Linux Hiker. Warning, I'm a libertarian. Not only am I a libertarian, I'm actually the vice chair of the IT committee for the Libertarian Party, so I'm actually libertarian. If you want to follow the company, Command Prompt Inc., please feel free. And I am JD at Command Prompt. You can email me. I will respond if I can. I will try and help you if I can. My company and our community is all about building people and their technology choices as long as they make the right one with Postgres. So please don't hesitate, and I can get you pointed in the right direction if you want to contribute, if you want to be part of PGConf or Postgres.org, or if you want to start a pug or whatever. We're more than happy to try and help you get off the ground, give you some resources for that. This talk definitely succeeds based on your participation. I'm not interested in preaching to you. I am not an evangelist. I am an advocate, which means I could be wrong. It's not likely, but I could be. I am also not afraid to offend you because it's not my problem. I will not try to, but I do sometimes say some controversial things that upset people, so I'm just giving you a little PG-13 disclaimer right now. All right, let's get to it. PostgreSQL, building people, building technology, and providing foundation. We've been around forever. I mean, in terms of when relational databases started, we were there. Now, we weren't called Postgres back then, but our code base goes back there. We are the only open source data project supported by all 4 major cloud providers. And I say that, people are like, well, what about MySQL? MySQL is not an open source project. They're a product. There's nothing wrong with that, but they are not a project. Compose supports us. Scarily enough, Azure and Microsoft supports us. They just announced that last week. Google Cloud Platform supports us. Amazon obviously supports us. Amazon's actually a diamond sponsor of our conference. As well as pretty much everybody else. Linode, DigitalOcean, I mean, everybody supports Compose. We just did that one. And so using us is not hard. If you are a person that loves the cloud, you don't have to worry about how do I install it, how do I configure it. You can just fire up an RDS instance. You can just fire up Google Cloud Postgres and just use it. Even Heroku backs to us. If you want to use Heroku. So it's not something that limits you in any way. In fact, it expands upon your abilities to get things done. We build people. We are an international community of engineers, practitioners, consultants, and hobbyists. You're not going to find another community except maybe Linux that is like us. We have the smartest people that when they talk, you sit there and your eyes start to bleed and you feel like you've had too much garlic because you just can't understand what they're saying. We've got the standard practitioner. We've got community builders. We've got teachers. We've got mentors. One of the things that we do is actually if you want to public speak, if you would like to speak but you're nervous, our community will actually hold workshops to help you become a better public speaker. We want to not only build our community, but we want to build you too. We want you to be better through your use of Postgres. We build technology. We have 20 years of active development in the current PostgreSQL. The only other database or only other open source project that is even close that I'm aware of would be something like Linux or FreeBSD. There are others, but they're not as significant in terms of community base. Further, our code base goes all the way back to 1973, when all the original stuff was starting, when forget what it was called, R or something like that, was coming out. Basically, as long as I've been alive. That's how far back we go. And we continue to innovate every single release. We do things now that we never would have thought that we would have ever done before. For example, people are talking about Mongo. We can do what Mongo does. We just do it. We don't lose data. right? And I'm not trying to bash Mongo. There are places for Mongo. But the point is that with Postgres, you can do what Mongo does without some of the limitations of Mongo. You know, things like I miss joins. We don't have that problem, but you can still store your documents. Can anyone else name any other project that's been around that long? I mean, that... correct, but not 40 years. Yeah, no, GCC is a very long-standing project. There's no doubt. But we are older than the Free Software Foundation. If our code base, we go all the way back to the original Ingress. We provide foundation. We have very strong employment opportunities. In fact, if you know Postgres, and I don't mean like I can log in and run a query. I mean, anybody can do that, knows SQL. But if you learn Postgres, how to configure the wall writer, the BG writer, what auto vacuum is, how the optimizer works, you will make bank, period. And you will always have a job, period. And right now, the hottest thing on the planet is anybody who can say, we don't want to run Oracle anymore. We want to run Postgres. If you can do that, you've got a job at any number of companies making more money than you thought you would be making because it is in that much demand. We have strong contribution opportunities. It doesn't matter if you're an advocate or if you're an engineer or if you're a professional document writer. It doesn't matter. All across the board, you can contribute. You don't have to contribute to .org. If you're not a native English speaker, you can contribute in your own native country. We've got communities in Japan, Singapore, Israel, South Africa. In fact, the South Africans are just about ready to launch their own conference series. We have spent strong innovation opportunities. Think about it. 10 years ago, nobody would have thought, well, we're going to have a relational database that's also a document database. No one would have considered that 10 years ago. Well, now you have it. If you've got an idea and it belongs in data, it has something to do with data, you have the ability to innovate and get that into or as a part of PostgreSQL. We provide everything you need, technologically speaking, as well as community speaking, in order to drive that. Postgres has spent 20 years enabling others to build, grow, and create. Oracle has spent billions to create a business model for lawyers. Fun stuff, all that advocacy stuff. Let's talk about some actual technical stuff. I wish this was a pen. All right, we have the ultimate and core feature experience, an astounding array of interesting features, and the most complete ecosystems of solutions for any project or enterprise. Ultimate and core feature experience. We are BSD licensed, ACID compliant, multi-concurrency version control, extensive proper typing and constraints, binary and logical replication, backups, a robust API for almost any language, Rust, Go, blah, 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 and asynchronous queuing. This is just a minor list. I could have had 90 slides and still not even broached our core feature set. This is just what everybody goes, oh, okay, awesome, you're complete. Yes, we're complete. BSD licensed. We allow unprecedented freedom to build your community, your technology, your project, or your company. You are not limited in what you can do. In fact, I take that back. There is one limitation. You can't sue us. That's the only limitation. You want to close source it? Close source it. Many have. We have built some of the billion-dollar companies that are out there. It's a different name. It might have a slightly different command, but it's our code. It's unfettered access to innovation and the fastest growing style of license in the open source ecosystem. That is a reference. We had some folks from Red Monk, their analysts that came down, and they worked with, I think it was Black Duck, I think is what it was, and they did a license survey, figuring out what licenses are growing, what licenses are shrinking. BSD-style licenses, by far, are the most chosen now. Didn't used to be that way. It is, either BSD or Artistic or MIT or Apache, those types of licenses that allow you the freedom to do what you need to do with the software to make it work for you, whether it be a business reason or a technical reason or just because you like working with software. It's ACID compliant. We're at a data conference. Would you say your data is important? Come on. Would you say your data is important? Then why would you run on anything that is not ACID compliant? There's no guarantee. There are other databases that are ACID compliant, of course. I'm not going to mention them because you should run Postgres. But Thomas, we're atomic. Each transaction is all or nothing. You will never have a partial commit. If you do a batch commit of 1 million rows and one row's bad, and granted this sucks, but this is the way it's supposed to work, all 1 million rows will roll back. There are no partial commits. We are consistent. All transactions will move the database from one full state to another. You will never have a situation where, say, a foreign key is not fulfilled and yet the data is in the table. Isolation. The execution of concurrent transactions result in a result that would be obtained if the transaction were executing sequentially. This is actually the isolation combined with MVCC is what gives us all the awesomeness. The ability to do all the multi-user stuff, the fact that one person can change a row and be working within a modified data set, and if they haven't committed, another connection won't see any of those changes. And unless you do an explicit lock, you're not even going to interfere with each other. And durability. Once a transaction has been committed, it should survive power losses or crashes. This one's a little rough because, well, software speaking, that's correct. If you, like I have a client that 2 weeks ago, who here uses Slack? Okay. Okay. Well, my client uses IRC, and we were on the channel, and we were on the channel, and I get pinged, and it's always an amazing thing. You're sitting there, and I was working on the conference, and I was writing an article and a whole bunch of other stuff, and my main contact there goes, "Hey, JD, you around?" Like, and I get the little thing, the beep that lets him know he's actually talking directly to me. I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he goes, "Well, we were just kind of wondering if you could shut down the databases." I'm like, what? It's the middle of the day. "Yeah, we just got notified that there's water pouring into the data center." Now, I don't know if he was so terrified that he reached that calm before the storm moment, that moment that, the fight or flight, and he was just kind of stuck there. But my response would have been a little bit more explicit. Like, shut down the databases now. Don't ask any questions. And so, yeah, I log in and shut down all these databases. And they're a fairly large installation. I can't tell you who they are, unfortunately, but yeah. So durability, assuming that your hard drives are intact, you're going to get your data back. Multiversion concurrency control. A lot of people don't get this. It's almost voodoo, frankly. I know how it works, but that doesn't mean I understand how it works. But each query sees only transactions completed before the transaction started. So with visibility, you're not going to have this weird thing where you have someone who has inserted into a table. If they're in a transaction, you can insert into a table, but the other connection will not see that insert until you commit. Now, that doesn't seem all that odd if you're talking about 2 connections or 2 sessions, but what if you're talking about 1,000? We have 1,000 sessions all modifying the same data. And when it commits, that's when it becomes visible to everybody else. Multi-statement transaction and transactions own previous queries are also visible. In short, that means that if you insert into a table and you're in a transaction, you select from that table, you're going to see that insert, but the other people won't. The above assumes the default read committed as isolation level because there's all kinds of other weird ones like dirty read and things like that, and don't use them. Really, there's only 2, generally speaking. There's read committed and then there's serializable. Serializable is what you use when you're doing like checkouts for ordering, things like that. And I'm thanking Bruce Momgen. He's a core member of PostgreSQL. He's a fantastic speaker. And he was kind enough to make all of his slides Creative Commons, so I didn't have to do anything but copy and paste and thank him. Open source, right? Okay, we have extensive proper typing and constraints. And I do mean extensive. Here's an example. So I'm running 9.6.2 here, which actually we're on 9.6.3 now. Monkey's elbow. Fantastic stuff. Create table data layer, proper VChar. Varchar 8 means that nothing more than 8 characters should be able to go in there. Insert into data layer value. Microsoft breaks this rule without safe mode. And that's true. I'm not bashing MySQL. They do enough of that themselves. But Postgres will error out. And that's going to work not just when you think, well, that's just text. What about everything else? It's every single data type. We do not have unconstrained types. Everything, yes, we have text, which will allow you to insert an ungodly amount of text. I think it's 1 gigabyte's the limit. But in terms of if you constrain a type, if you put a check on it, length, type, whatever, you're not going to be able to violate that. We also have proper typing with queries. Select star from data layer where proper varchar equals 1. Who can tell me why that fails? 1 is not a string. Strings are quoted. We didn't used to fail on that. In fact, that's a relatively... what version did we fix that? Is it 9.9? 8.4? It's called implicit casting when that works. And the problem with implicit casting is that when you're implicit about something, you don't know exactly why it's working. And you could get... they were corner cases, but you could get some really obscure query results if you were selecting one type from a table that didn't match the data type and things like that. So in order for this to work, I would have had to say quote 1 quote. Not going to go through all of them, but here's some of our typing. We have numeric types, integer, arbitrary, floating point, serial. Serial is your auto increment. We have a monetary type, don't use it, use numeric. We have a character type, char, don't use it, use varchar or text. Why don't you use char? Anybody know, character? This is old school stuff here. It is weird. Who actually? Spacing. So if you have a char 8 and you insert 4 characters, it will pad. So if you then query for just the 4 characters, it won't return. Don't use it. It's literally a legacy type. It's a fixed width type, and they pad it out. It's crazy. Just don't do it. Binary, we have byte A. We also have our own called large object, which has some benefits, but byte A is the standard. Date and time, we do some crazy stuff with date time. It is awesome. If you are in the Pacific time zone and I'm in the Eastern time zone and you insert data, the time will automatically change when I select from it. I don't have to do any kind of math. It just works. In fact, it just works so well that you'll find yourself questioning whether or not it's working. It's one of those things where you start to use it and you're like, wait, is that right? Because it's always right. And it takes all of the pain of working with timestamps and dates and all that away from you. They're all gone. We have Boolean. Oracle has no Boolean. Boolean is, and interestingly enough with Boolean, you can have true, false, you can have 1, 0, you can have yes, no, 0, 1, and they all work. And they all work together. So you can say, show me where everything is true, and it doesn't matter if you inserted true or yes or 1 or any of that, they will all return appropriately. We have enumerated types. Sad, happy. Everyone here knows what an enum is, right? Okay, if you don't, please say so. Part of this is education. Geometric types, points, lines, segments, boxes, paths, polygons, circles. You doing map crap? Latitude, longitude, anything with geometry. We can handle it. In fact, one of the top not GPS, GIS, thank you, Debbie, GIS platforms in the world is run on Postgres, and it's called PostGIS. Network addresses. How many here have had to deal with network addresses? We properly deal with them. If you say I have an INET, you can't insert an incorrect IP address. It's impossible. So that when you configure your Linux box and you accidentally fat type something, and then you try to insert that to record it because you're smart and you document everything, right? The code is not the documentation, people. And then you fat finger it in there, it's going to return and say, no, that's not a valid type. I don't know what you're doing. We have bit 10 text search. This is awesome. We have full text transactional full text searching with phrase search, the whole bit. UUID, we all know what that is. XML, some of you may remember that. The whole internet runs on it. And it's not only is it conforming, it's validating, just like the JSON-B stuff. If you try to insert an XML document, it will verify that it's XML, or you can't insert it. We do have JSON-B. This is for Mongo people, Cassandra people, CouchDB people, all the people that will eventually be running Postgres anywhere, anyway. Please accept your fate. But we have it. Composite types. I actually get into composite types a little later in the talk. They're weird. And we have range types. Int4 range, int8 range, where you can say, this is a range of numbers that I need to store. Time zone range and date range. If you're doing calendar stuff, I'm available from Friday to Saturday. Constraints. Check constraints. Check if your price is greater than 0. Now, a lot of people, especially nowadays, are like, well, I do that in the app. Well, that's great until someone connects to your database not from the app. No one will ever do that. You're naive. There will always be someone. And usually, and even today, this happens. It's somebody who wants to use Excel. And they want to run queries against your data. I'm not going to mention who those people are because they sign the checks. Check first name. We can use a regex. Make sure the name is all characters. Mixed case, of course, because depending on how we like to write our name, I mean, I'm Joshua D. Drake, but I write it as JD all the time, uppercase. Not null. Oracle does this wrong. In fact, Oracle does this so wrong, even their docs now say they do it wrong. They tell you point blank, do not rely on Oracle's null behavior. It may change. And the basic problem is what I state here. In Oracle, quote, quote, is considered null, which is incorrect. It's an empty string, which means you know what it is. And what is null? Nothing. Unknown. It's not even nothing. It's just completely unknown. Unique. Now, the problem with unique, obviously, is that it actually accepts null, because since null is unknown, we don't know if it's unique or not. Primary keys fix that. Primary key is basically unique, not null. Foreign keys. We make sure that your data actually maps correctly. You're not going to have two different document stores with two different sets of data that don't correlate. And we support deferrable keys, which are awesome if you're running heavy transactions. And what that means is, let's say you're inserting 5,000 rows. You can set a foreign key on the fly as deferrable, or I should say as deferred. And it will check all of the references at the end of the transaction instead of one by one. It's a huge performance boost. We also support multi-column keys. So it doesn't have to just be ID. It could be ID first name, ID social security number, whatever. Exclusion constraints. Exclude X. You can build your own. This is my favorite. Create table phone. Num text not null. Check. Num is all characters. Create table, boom, insert into phone. Yes, we support multi-value insert. That's why you have, the parents values comma, parents values common. Not null or null value in column num violates not null constraint. Failed row contains null, insert phone, so on and so forth. New row violates check. Failed row tells me when it fails, and then I finally am able to insert when I realize, oh, look, it's actually asking for numbers. Binary and logical replication. This is a big thing. A lot of people are, well, I need to be able to federate. I don't know how to scale up, so we'll just put a lot of instances out there in the wild. We do binary replication. We have hot standby. Hot standby means you can run queries on your replicas. We have warm standby, can't run queries. Cold standby, that's for disaster recovery. Load balancing between replicas. Now, Postgres by default does not support that, but that is where our awesome ecosystem comes in. There are multiple utilities. The most common is pgpool2, which is a connection pooler and load balancer. And if you connect and you run a read-only query, it will actually automatically balance out to your replicas. So you can continue to federate, continue to scale. We have point-in-time recovery. We can recover to the exact transaction before you accidentally typed delete without a where clause. Who here has done that? Accidentally delete? Yes, that's my favorite. I used to teach a week-long, in fact, I miss these days because it was very profitable. I used to teach a week-long Postgres course for people who use PIC. Who here knows what PIC is? Exactly. It is a very obscure old database, file-based, used in, well, let's put it this way. It comes from the COBOL days. And everybody here, I'm sure, knows at least what COBOL is. If you don't, you're making me feel really old. And one of the things that I would teach them is about transactions, because PIC doesn't have transactions, or at the time it didn't. And I would show them exactly how to do a transaction, destroy all their data, and then commit. And I would tell them about rollback and testing and all this. And then we would do a workshop, right, where they would be deleting data, inserting data, all these types of things. And we would get to the point where they would have to do a delete. And one of the things I would stress through the whole week, because this is what we'd be doing on Thursday. So starting Monday, one of the first things I'd say is deletes are always in a transaction. Always. By Thursday, they've heard it 50 times. They would go to do the problem and solve it, and then all of a sudden I'd hear gasps because the next step wouldn't work. And I would say, well, did you use a transaction? And invariably, half the room would put their head down on their desk because they had to rebuild the entire database. Point-in-time recovery gives you the ability to say, oh, okay, that sucked. We'll restore to this point in time or this point in transaction or whatever the case may be. And you can bring it up, take a backup of the table, reload it, whatever the case may be, or fail over. We also have logical replication. The difference between binary and logical replication is this. Binary replication is a literal copy of the binary files on the disk. You are replicating binary. It also means you are replicating everything. So if you have 50 databases, you can't replicate just one. You're replicating all 50 to the replica. Logical replication, you are replicating the data result. So PG Logical and Bucardo Multimaster, what will happen is you can say, I only want these tables to replicate to this replica and these tables to replicate to that replica. And what's awesome is that you can use them together. So you can have one replica for, say, HR, one replica for sales, and then one replica is your disaster recovery, and that's using binary replication. We also have cascading replication. That's what this graphic is here. We have a master and a slave, and then two more slaves that are actually replicating from the first slave. So you don't have to overload, let's say, a data link. Maybe the data link is between the first slave and the second slave is better than the data link between the master and the slave. Backups, binary backups. This is great. Fully online. You never have to take Postgres offline to get your backups, ever. You just say, I'm starting a backup. You take a copy, and then you stop the backup. It's a little more complicated than that, but not by much. PG-based backup is the standard. It ships with Postgres. That's how you get your binary backups. But you can use tar. You can use rsync. You can use robocopy. I think that's the Windows thing. Anybody here running Windows? Thank God. You can do logical backups, pgdump, pgdumpall. That is where we actually copy the SQL out and the data out in a text form. It's particularly useful for, stop? Am I out of time, really? Wow. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. Incremental differential backups, PG backrest, point-in-time recovery backups, robust API for any language. This is where I was getting to the center of the universe here. We can do anything you want if you connect to us. Anything you need. Asynchronous queuing. Now, don't get me wrong, RabbitMQ or something, or Kafka might be a better choice, but it also might be complete overkill for what you need. So we do offer asynchronous queuing right into the connection. We have an astounding array of interesting features. If you're wondering what that is, that's obviously an array, but we have what's called dollar quoting. That's what the dollar signs are. And what they do is they eliminate the requirement for escaping. You don't have to worry about backslashes or anything like that. It just figures it out. It's very useful. NoSQL, JSON data types, full data type checking, operator support, useful functions. Use JSON-B. JSON is largely a legacy type. That's true. It's a little faster for inserting, but it preserves white space. But JSON-B is where you want to be. Stored in a binary fashion. It's much faster for retrieval, and it's indexable. We do full data type checking, as you can see here. I'm trying to insert non-JSON. It tells me, can't do that. Operator support. Complete, get a JSON array element, get object field by key, object at a specified path, so on and so forth. Additional operator support, you're going to see two of them there. They're called the Icecream Operators. Does a left JSON value contain the right JSON path value? You do comparatives. Does the string exist at a top level? Do any of these arrays string exist as a top level? So on and so forth. You probably can't. Oh, you can see that. Cool. You can convert to JSON or out. Foreign data wrappers. This is where you get the ability to connect to anything you want. You can link a table from Postgres from whatever source you have. For example, there's the comprehensive list, but some notables, ODBC, JDBC, anything SQL Alchemy can connect to. PostgreSQL, that's your federation. Oracle, it's great. I mean, say you've got an Oracle backend and you want to slowly migrate the bosses to something better. You can use Postgres and mount an Oracle data table for, say, reporting or front end or whatever. MySQL, Mongo, we can mount Mongo. File notables, yes, CSV, JSON, XML, and others. You can query S3 like it's a table. You can query iCal like it's a table. Google, Twitter. Don't ask me why. I didn't write it. IMAP, that one actually kind of makes sense. So on and so forth. Dun & Bradstreet. Literally the center of your data universe. It's how you can connect to everything with a single standard API, doing whatever it is that you need to do. Extensions, PG Audit, that's for auditing tables. If you need to track everything that happened in a table. PostGIS, we talked about that, GIS. PG Crypto, cryptography, hashing, keys, et cetera, plus thousands more. Anybody here know CPAN? Really? Okay, there's a few. CPAN is the Perl network of modules, very similar, but for Postgres. Composite types. Okay, this is the really cool one. Check this out. Okay, your first one, I'm creating a schema, which is basically just kind of like a folder. I'm telling, let's look in this folder. Now I'm going to create a table called weird. That's standard. Foo, text, bar is an array of text. Now I'm going to create a table really weird, which is actually foo of the composite type weird. But wait, weird is a table. Then I'm going to create a type still weird as foo, bar, baz, weird. Then I create a table, text, still weird. So now my table is of this type, which is of a type of another table. And then create table, text, still weird. And this is how you have to insert into it. And this is how you get stuff out of it. And this is another way you can insert into it. And the point here is that the only thing tables are is a composite type. That's all it is. But because you've created a type, or a table, with a name, you've also created a type, and you can use that type. Most complete ecosystem solutions, project enterprise, blah, 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 innovate with a solid foundation. We are the OEM of databases. If you look out in the world at what the really cool stuff is being done, it's on Postgres. Greenplum, high-end business intelligence, MPP stuff, Postgres. Timescale, time series database, Postgres. Pipeline DB, streaming database, Postgres. Aurora. Aurora Postgres is Postgres with a different storage engine. Cockroach DB, they support the protocol of Postgres. They're like, we don't want to have to rewrite an entire API, we'll just use Postgres. Informix, yes, that Informix is Postgres-based. MongoDB BI. PostgreSQL, that's federated Postgres. Amazon RDS, Google Postgres, and so on and so on and so on. And this, I just have to put this, I can't harass you for your technology choices, so I'll just say that Joe is the only editor you need. I won't comment on what editor you're using. But it is the only editor you'll ever need. I get a lot of grief for this because it's very old school, and it's not the other ones. But since I'm the boss, that's the first thing that gets installed on every customer server. And then in closing, although I don't have time because everybody's staring at me, feel free to harass me, talk to me, during lunch or whatever. I can talk about open source business, PostgreSQL Conference US, and of course, I will take your money. Have a great day.